In a culture that tells us we can choose motherhood or, Good Counsel knows we're meant for motherhood and. Hi, I'm Samantha Elbertson. I work on behalf of the maternity home Good Counsel. We have 4 homes in New York and New Jersey where motherhood is rescued, preserved, and celebrated every day. This is Motherhood and. Monica Snyder, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
I'd love to get into an article that you just had published. You co-authored, and it was published in Public Discourse, the Journal of the Witherspoon Institute. But maybe first we should back up and introduce you, give us some of your background and who you're working for.
Sure. So my name is Monica Snyder. I am the executive director of Secular Pro-Life. I'm an atheist. And Secular Pro-Life is an organization run by atheists, but you do not have to be atheist to participate. Our mission is to advance secular arguments against abortion, to make more space for agnostics, atheists, non-religious people to do anti-abortion work, and importantly, to build interfaith coalitions, we mean any faith or no faith, of people who want to work together on the abortion issue. So I will emphasize again, it's run by atheists, and our board leadership and myself are atheists, but we have help from all kinds of people, atheists and agnostics, yes, spiritual but not religious, Catholics, evangelicals, Jewish, Buddhist, Wiccan, all sorts, because the bottom line is really what we're saying. We don't care what your religious beliefs are. We care if you want to work with us on what we consider a grievous human rights violation that transcends our differences. So that's where I work, and I have met many wonderful people through my job, many people who are very passionate about this issue from very different walks of life. And the article that you referenced, I co-authored with Charlie Camosi and Eric Scheidler, who are very different from me in background, in religion, and whatever demographics, but we all shared an interest in the topic that we're going to talk about, and we wanted to make sure we brought different perspectives together to make for a stronger piece when we discussed it.
It is a human rights issue, probably the most egregious in history. And we can't continue, obviously, from a faith background. God might be my reason for why I feel it's necessary to fight for life. God is my reason for life.
Sure.
But everyone has their own reasons for appreciating, loving, and respecting the lives of those around them, and that
absolutely
includes unborn, and that includes the lives of women who either for one reason or another, whether it's abuse or just even the misconception society has that they can't somehow be a mother and have their baby and still also be the woman they want to be in their career and their relationships in the world. And so it's very important, and I thank you very much for your work, because it's very important to have this conversation so that we can start to bridge this gap that we're over here on one side screaming, we love women and babies. And this is how we think we can solve the problems they're facing. And then on the other side, they're screaming, we love women and babies. And this is how we need to find fix the problems that we're facing. So it's really a matter of finding that commonality and just a multifaceted approach to working together. So that is 100% where you are ahead of the game and leading the charge, and I really appreciate that, and I appreciate you spending time with me today.
Well, thanks for saying that.
Just a little background, how did you get into you're the executive director at Secular Pro-Life, but I don't think you started there. How did you work your way into that, find the passion in your heart? What moves you into this work?
I got into pro-life activism because of social media. I was around when Facebook was born, and I joined, I think not right away, but circa 2006 or something like that. And at that time they had debate boards, which were very cool. They were set up for longer form discussion. They don't have them anymore, but at the time they did. I joined a bunch of different groups for different interests I had. One of them was a group that was just called Pro-Life, and it had a discussion board. And to my surprise, because social media was still up and coming in a way that we forget now, I didn't realize there would be pro-choice people in the group. I thought it would just be pro-life people talking about why they're pro-life. I don't know what I thought it would be. There were quite a few. very
A debate
dedicated
group, I could
pro-choice people.
imagine.
And the interesting thing about the discussion boards is it makes it harder to troll. So trolling is like quick
Mm,
snips, quick poking at people, just trying to be obnoxious. The discussion boards, it's too long form, So the people who were involved were less likely to be trolls and more likely to be sincerely engaging, not necessarily happily or even necessarily politely, but with substance.
mm,
So I got sort of sucked into these debate boards with the same kinds of personalities, pro-choice and pro-life alike, which is the personality that is annoyed someone is wrong on the internet and wants to argue about it endlessly. And I was young enough and in a phase of my life where I had time to do that. And I met a lot of people. A lot of people I met, I'm still friends with to this day. And not just pro-life people, pro-choice people too. It was really a growing experience, both in terms of honing and understanding my own side of the issue and also coming to a much better understanding of why someone would be pro-choice and much less of this sort of cartoonish villainy idea of pro-choice and more regular people and their different reasons. Anyway, throughout all of that, one of the people that was also on there all the time was a woman named Kelsey Hazard. And a couple years later, she contacted me and she said, I really want to create a group for pro-life people who aren't religious. I just feel like there isn't really a space. And at the time I was an agnostic. And she said, I know you're agnostic. Do you want to help me? And I said, sure, why not? I thought it would basically be a Facebook group,
mhm.
very similar to what we were already doing. And initially it was. And then the rest of it is just a series of us stumbling into larger and larger opportunities and finding more and more of an audience of people, both the people we were trying to make the space for. To this day, years later, I still have people online discovering us for the first time and saying, I thought I was the only life
Mm,
atheist in existence. So that group we're making space for and bringing in and welcoming in and giving them a place to plug in. But then also what I call more traditional pro-life people, which is basically politically conservative Christians for the most part, who are really looking for a different language and a different framing to articulate what they already feel in a way that's more accessible to others. So we continue to find this audience. We continue to get larger than we expected. I mean, compared to a lot of formal pro-life nonprofits, we are pretty small, but larger than we expected. And eventually, it was an all-volunteer organization for a very long time, I think over a decade. And then eventually, we very, very, very slowly started to realize that we should have donors and we should maybe thank the donors when they send us money, and maybe we should, like, we don't know, this is completely by the seat of our pants. And we started to have people who sort of said, yeah, I would be interested if this becomes a bigger thing, I would be interested. And we started fundraising more. Eventually we fundraised enough for a formal position, which was the executive director. And Kelsey wanted me to do it. I wanted to do it. Kelsey is a full-time practicing attorney with children at home and a lot going on. And it wasn't really a good lineup for her. So she is the board president. She's still around. She still coordinates the blog every week. So she's still very plugged in, but she wasn't going to lean into it in this way. And
mm.
I was in a position in my life where I could and I wanted to. So it really worked out very well. And now very, very slowly, for us, it's very exciting, but since that time, that was a couple of years ago, I now have an assistant and we have our first intern, and we also have Secular Pro-Life has an outsized social media presence, largely because we have a cadre of very dedicated and often very talented volunteers. And we coordinate them. I think last year we had over 100 people fill out our volunteer survey, and they give us their specifics of what they're interested in, where their talents lie. Some of them send us their resume. It's pretty rigorous, and it's been amazing the people we've been able to plug in. And so we've been able to do a lot with a little, and it's been going wonderfully. I love it. I'm completely obsessed with the job. So
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And to know, again, like you said, to have it grow is so exciting, because again, it's bridging that gap, but to have a space for people who don't relate to that initial faith stance that so much
right.
of the pro-life movement has. I mean, that is, like you said, the language of the movement. And so like having it can be alienating to those who don't share
Yeah.
the same faith. And so I think it's so important and it's so necessary that everyone in the world realizes that it is a basic human right. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't
Yes.
matter anything. It doesn't matter who how you identify yourself.
Yeah, we say, you know, I
It
really don't care if you are a Christian or an atheist, or if you're queer or straight, or if you're Democrat or Republican. I don't care. Are you a human being?
are you a human being? Do
It's a
you
human
think
rights
other
issue
human
and you're a
beings?
human being. So I
Yes.
think we should be on the same page, and
It
we can hash out other things at another time. But
that's right. That's right.
and importantly, we have frequently had Christian followers throughout the years and to this day who will ask, sometimes more kindly, sometimes more obnoxiously, but variously will ask, you know, why should atheists in particular care about this or care about anything? You know, how do atheists
Mm.
ground their morality? All these kinds of questions. And that's a whole bigger discussion, much bigger than this podcast episode. But I always want to point out to them that this is not a new idea. Secular people, including atheists, you can see, whether you understand the why or not, you can see by watching them that the overwhelming majority of them do care about human rights, do care about other people, and you can see it in the way that it manifests for them when they fight quite ferociously sometimes for the rights of immigrants, the rights of transgendered people, or even in the abortion debate, when
Mhm.
passionately pro-choice people go to ground over the abortion issue, they are usually doing it because they want to protect women's rights. They want to protect the right of bodily autonomy. They want to protect fights for equality. All of this is related to them caring about human rights. So that is not the question. In the secular abortion debate, the question is not, why should secular people care about other people or about human rights? The secular abortion debate is, do embryos and fetuses count among the people we are defending, and why or why not? That is,
Mhm.
and importantly also, how do bodily rights fit into it? That's the secular abortion debate.
Mhm.
And I think it's important for the more traditional pro-life people to understand that, because it's just a different focus. You usually don't have to like reinvent the existence of ethics to have that discussion. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. Right. So do you want, with that being said, do you want to jump into this article? It's Pivoting to Unwanted and Coerced Abortion, a Manifesto. You
Yes.
published it June 16th. So this is a recent publication. And I think it's just spot on. And working with Good Counsel, it is who we see. Women who do not want abortion and otherwise would be coerced or forced.
Yes.
Now,
Yes. So there's a couple different thoughts that went into it before we put the article together. So first of all, there's the issue of, since Dobbs, the fights over how abortion should be regulated have been fierce and difficult. And to be quite frank, I think our side, the pro-life side, has been on the defense for most of
mhm,
it. We're going to continue to have those fights. We say in the article, we made a point of saying in the article that laws protecting prenatal justice are crucial, and we are not going to let that go. But at the same time, like you said at the beginning of the podcast, there are people on the pro-life side and the pro-choice side who say, you know, we love women and babies and we want to take care of them, and this is how we think we need to do that. There's so much space for people who are completely opposing each other in terms of the law to work together in other venues. There's so much space to be decreasing abortion in terms of demand rather than supply. And we know that there are a lot of pro-choice people out there who would be interested in those projects. Now, so secular pro-life is almost entirely online. Almost everything we do is online. And online spaces and online debates, I think it's really important for the people who engage in them a lot to continually remember that they do not represent all of people's thoughts or all of the people who are involved in this. It's easy to forget, as
it
if you
is.
are arguing online a lot, you're going to get the most vitriol, you're going to get the most nonsense, you're going to be the most tempted to be a poorer version of yourself, and you're going to start to think, if you don't take specific steps to inoculate yourself from these fallacies, you're going to start to think that the opposition are all this troll on Twitter and they're
Right.
just a bunch of evil idiots. It's
Hmm.
not true. That's why it's so important. I tell people all the time, it's very important. If you have the ability and opportunity, you should be maintaining active friendships with people who disagree with you, whether it's on this issue or other issues, because if nothing else, even if you don't ever talk about the subject, it keeps you constantly remembering that people who think very differently from you are people you like and get along with and see as full complex human beings. And that's your vaccine against Twitter.
That's
So
right.
anyway, all that said, there are a lot of people who are pro-choice, and by that I mean they think abortion should be legal, at least in the first trimester, at least for various hard cases. You know, you can debate the definitions, but they definitely aren't trying to outlaw elective abortion. And at the same time, they care a lot about wanting to make sure women have true autonomy, not just abortion, but options, real options. They don't want women to get abortions who don't want the abortions. They want it to be one of options for people to think about what's best for them and not be pushed into it. And we know you've probably seen a lot of this directly in your work. And I know that pro-life boots on the ground, sidewalk counselors, PRCs, maternity homes, they see this all the time. There are plenty of women who are seeking abortions not because they felt like they had all the options in front of them and this was just the best situation, but because they felt like they didn't have a lot of other options. And
Mhm.
both pro-life and pro-choice people should have a problem with that. And we should be able to work together to figure out some kind of commonality to decrease that. And so that was a big part of us wanting to write this. We were thinking about the many pro-life people who live in, for example, Illinois or New York or California or a state that is not going to have pro-life laws anytime in the near future at all. The law is not going to be your battle in those states. Maybe
Mhm.
some peripheral things about, informed consent or, around the edges, but that's not happening. And meanwhile, you still want to help decrease abortions. What can you do? And then we were thinking, well, and also whatever we say about that, that will apply to everyone in all of the states anyway. Even
Mhm.
if you're in a state that has outlawed it from conception, you're still going to have people in these difficult situations and you don't want them to feel trapped. And so we wanted to put together this sort of calling for pro-choice people, for pro-life people who care about the law, but they're in very pro-choice states, for pro-life people who don't care about the law that much and want to work on the social side. There's so many groups where there are plenty of opportunities to figure out what are the problems leading to this and what can we do to help mitigate those. And so in particular, we focused in the article, yes, we had several testimonial examples of women describing
Mhm.
the abortions they felt pushed into and how that affected them. And those are important to give you, a colorful, detailed picture of what this looks like. But we also talk about the research to back it up. It's not just anecdotes. And in particular, there was a study published, I think, in early 2023, where they
Mhm.
asked a lot of different questions in this study. It wasn't only just about what I'm about to explain, but crucially, they asked women to pick one of 4 descriptions of their abortion. So it was a survey of women who'd had abortions, and they chose women who were all in their early 40s. I think the idea behind it was there's been some time now for you to think about it. It's not like it was yesterday and you're in the whirlwind of what's going on. You had some time. If you were going to describe your abortion in one of the following 4 ways, how would you describe it? And the options they gave were: 1, my abortion was wanted and consistent with my values and preferences. 2, my abortion was accepted, although potentially inconsistent with my values and preferences. 3, my abortion was unwanted and not consistent with my values and preferences. And 4, my abortion was coerced and not consistent with my values and preferences. Now, it's important to understand that in the study, they don't define for the women what wanted, accepted, unwanted, or coerced mean. They don't define those specifically. And especially the
Mhm.
word coerced is important because some people think it can only mean gun to your head, I'll kill you if you don't do this, on the one extreme. And some people will say anytime a woman, if she says that if she had had more financial or emotional support, she wouldn't have done this, that's coercion. So people will
Mhm.
debate, like, what's the
What
level
that means. Yeah.
of coercion? But I think the important thing with this survey is whatever we think the definition should be, the women who picked that 4th option, they
They
felt
felt it.
coerced.
Yes.
Now, maybe we might not agree with it. Maybe we think that they're being too liberal with the definition. We can debate that, and I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but they definitely didn't feel like this was a liberation.
Mhm.
And so, that being said, the study found that a third of women, 33%, said that their abortions were wanted and consistent with their values and preferences. So what I would say, like, the truly, definitely pro-choice goal here, like if this is what you want and makes sense for you, you know,
Mhm.
then 43%, a plurality, said that it was accepted, though potentially inconsistent. And that's the territory the two sides debate about, you know. Well, maybe that wasn't like their number one first choice, but they accepted it. They owned that decision. And so pro-choice people will say, oh, so 33 plus 43, so the overwhelming majority of women, this is what they wanted, or at least what they thought was best for them, minimum. And then the pro-life side might be like, well, if they said they accepted it, but they weren't so sure, like, what does that, is that okay? You know, so you can debate that part. Fine. Then they had another 14% said unwanted and 10% said coerced. So 24% that fell into the unwanted or coerced and not consistent with my values and preferences. And it's important to understand that currently we're speaking, you know, rough estimate, Guttmacher estimated a little over 1 million abortions in I think 2023 was the last year they measured it. That would be 240,000 women in 1 year getting abortions they described as unwanted or potentially coerced and inconsistent with their values and preferences. I think this is very important because I think this should be an easy area of common ground for people, regardless of what we think the abortion law should be, and regardless of what we think of fetal personhood or how we conceptualize embryos and fetuses philosophically. Like, you can leave all of that aside, and hopefully we can all agree, even if we all thought that abortion should be legal and that embryos are clumps of cells or whatever, even if we all thought that, hopefully we can still agree that it is not good for hundreds of thousands of women to feel pushed into this. And leaving the law aside, what can we do about that? What's happening here that this is a phenomenon? And so I notice when we talk about this, both sides often will talk about economic injustice, which is important. And they'll have different ideas of like what kind of policy preferences might help this, or should it be mostly private charities? That's what the PRCs are doing, and you guys try to stop us. Or should it be mostly on a public policy level? PRCs are never going to be enough, and you guys are against like welfare, and you guys. Okay, I'm sick of that conversation. Economic justice is important. I think there should be some policies we can agree on. But what I want to highlight too is the social and emotional level of this that I feel like gets missed, because I think that when you destigmatize abortion, so yes, legal is one thing, but you could have it legal and be like, oh, this is a necessary evil, safe, legal, and rare kind of conceptualization. But when you destigmatize it, when you try to say that it's just healthcare like any other healthcare, there's no additional dimension to this, it's morally neutral, or it's not a moral thing in the first place, it's just a totally private decision with no other, you know, considerations, which, to be frank, is it's probably true for some people, but overall it's a ridiculous, absurd farce. Okay. When you do that, I think the phenomenon we're missing is that the woman's community, her family, her partner, her employers, her parents, whoever, they hear that message too. It's not, that message isn't just going to the woman considering abortion, it's going to everybody. And so when you are pregnant in a potentially difficult situation, you will need support. Yes, financial support, also emotional support and social support. It's a vulnerable situation. It's an intimidating situation. Not just the pregnancy, obviously, also having a baby, and a huge monumental undertaking. As an aside, and I think we mentioned this in the article, I dislike when the pro-life side describes any of this in terms of convenience or inconvenience. Parenting is not convenient. It's not a matter of convenience or inconvenience. That's just underselling how important the entire thing is. And I don't think it's helpful for us to describe everything as either medical emergency or convenience. That's not true to people's, it's not true to my experiences as a mother. So anyway, you're in a vulnerable situation, potentially a very difficult situation to have a child, potentially. And you are going to need resources, time, money, effort, whatever, from your community, not just at a government level of policy. That's an important debate to have, but more intimate than that, from your family, from the people around you who can flex to help you. And whether they are willing to provide those resources, in many cases, will be influenced by how the community around you views abortion. If they view abortion as preventing a life from coming into existence rather than ending a life that exists, And more than that, if they view it as a morally neutral, anyone can do this and there's no reason to have a problem with it, then the woman herself has to defend why she wouldn't. On what grounds do you justify asking so much of your family and community when you could just take care of it, when you could just do the responsible thing, be a grown-up? And, you know, they talk about this. The pro-choice side talks about how getting an abortion is an act of responsibility. You know, our side says it's irresponsible, and they say, no, it's an act of responsibility. And they're saying more than I think they even realize when they describe it that way, because you are pressuring women. Some of these women, like the study said, wanted an abortion. It was consistent with what they wanted. They were not pressured into it. It's a mistake, I think, for the pro-life movement to describe this as if everyone who gets an abortion is a second victim. I don't think that's true.
Oh, not at all.
But
Yeah.
a lot of them on this community level, they feel like they don't even have the right to not get an abortion, like on a social level. I don't mean legal rights. I mean on a social level. And so when we talk about unwanted and coerced, yes, we need to talk about financial support. Yes, we need to talk about better support of working parents. You know, there are many things we need to talk about, better access to childcare, all these things that are important considerations. But the part I feel like gets missed a lot is how there is no way for society to send out signals about what abortion is, one way or the other, without affecting the way the woman's community treats her decision. It's not possible. So we recognize this very easily when we stigmatize abortion, which we do, and I own that. We think abortion is killing a valuable human child. That is stigmatizing, okay? I own that. When we stigmatize abortion, we make people feel more pressured to not get abortions. Everybody recognizes that. The pro-choice side recognizes it and condemns us for it, but I think we recognize it too. But what's frustrating to me is fewer people seem to recognize that the reverse is also true. When you destigmatize abortion, there's pressure either way. And when you destigmatize abortion, you are increasing the likelihood that a woman's community will pressure her to get one. There's no version of this where you can conceptualize abortion as neutral and nobody's pressuring her one way or the other. It's not a thing. It's a utopia fallacy. Now, maybe you think that it's worth it for other reasons. Destigmatizing it is necessary for other reasons, you know? I get that. I'm not asking people to sit, I'm not asking pro-choice people to help us stigmatize abortion. That seems improbable. I'm asking them to recognize that there are cause and effect relationships here, no matter what you do. And if your goal is women's true autonomy, it's complicated, because you need to recognize that some women, destigmatizing abortion will liberate them because they wanted to get one anyway, sure. And some women, it will shackle them in ways that you are, I don't think, intending to do. And maybe there's no other way from the pro-choice perspective. Maybe there's not, but own it. 24% of women saying that their abortions were unwanted or coerced. And I agree with some of I would say our skeptics, that probably the vast majority of those women did not have a literal gun to their head. That's not really what we're saying. But in many cases, they do feel abandoned and manipulated. And that's not okay, no matter how you feel about fetal personhood. It's just not okay.
And certainly at Good Counsel, we know that it is about each individual woman. And for so long, the narrative, the talking point, the message on the banners is about the babies. And I think that has done us more harm than good. We all love babies. I mean, there's those terrible people spewing things for a reaction about babies out there, but that's not the normal response to children and babies. And like you said, new people are not convenient, new people, but that's a whole nother conversation about, are we supposed to be comfortable? Is that the end goal? Like, comfort is not the ideal. However, what is most necessary, what I personally feel, and what I know Good Counsel works at, is walking alongside women, making sure she's okay, making sure she's in a space where it's not a crisis reaction. It's not a trauma-informed decision, making sure that her needs are taken care of and she's making decisions for herself, for the child who's already there, and for other children she might have, for her family that either has abandoned her or could not support her. For whatever reason, there are women who have it's not just, hey, I want an abortion or I don't want an abortion. Like, she has so many things going on in her life and so many messages her entire life that form her opinions about womanhood, about motherhood, and about community, that if you don't walk alongside her and get to her heart, then you're doing her an injustice by putting a label on her one way or the other. And
Sure.
so that's why, yes, the pro-life movement, or any side of the movements, they need to have legal battles. They need to be, speaking in those terms. But the real work, like, while you're doing the legal work, there's still real women, there's still real babies, there's still real families and generations of people who are just a mess and need real help right now. And
Yeah.
so what I love about working for Good Counsel is it is coming alongside women in every aspect. And so, like you said, sometimes the women feel coerced in a way that they're just not supported. Their
Yeah.
family doesn't want it, but
Yep.
they weren't, but maybe they're kicked out of their home. Maybe they're not kicked out of their home, but it just has become such a stressful situation that they
Right.
can no longer sustain the relationship or sustain that living situation while also dealing with a pregnancy.
Right.
So, and obviously bringing a child into that environment. And so, or you have women who are suffering at the hands of their abusers, have had more than one abortion already because of trafficking or abuse that has been covered up, and they're fleeing that for wanting to break that cycle. And so we see women that span all of it, and we walk alongside them and help them in any way that can make them okay, that can give them that level footing, that grounding, that support, that foundation that has crumbled for whatever reason.
Right.
And so in that way, we should all, like, we say the same thing about Good Counsel. That should be something we can all get along with. Ours is not an organization, and maternity homes in general are not organizations that are solely funded by Christians. So we have many denominations. We ourselves in Good Counsel, we are a Catholic organization started by Father Benedict Rochelle and Chris Bell, who are two very devout Catholics. And so we're not going to hide our identity and who we are, or not have God in that. But
Sure.
we also, it's a safe space for women to come in and maybe hear God's message for them, but in no way be coerced that they have to have that belief. We help anyone who comes in our path. There's no race or ethnicity or creed or background or trauma or diagnosis that would make us turn away from any woman. And so I think that's so important that we are working with groups like yours, and that more people are understanding that this is how we help and truly empower and free women and break the cycles of poverty, break the cycles of abuse, lift up future generations so that they feel that they can have all the choices. They feel like they can support their daughters
Right.
when and if that situation
Right.
also arises. And because I would think, from what I have heard, from a more pro-choice point of view, is also the idea that more people, especially unwanted people, or people who are born into poverty, create more, and not to say that their lives aren't valuable, right? Because that's wrong to say their lives aren't valuable just because they're poor. Um, but to say that, oh, should we be letting more people on the earth when we can't even take care of the poverty that we have?
Yeah,
But
that's
this is
such an
how we
insidious
solve the
mindset,
it
and I
is.
revile against it because it's so filled with classism. The
Mhm.
idea that we get to decide who to let have kids or not is already problematic, but also I find in a
Very
lot of these
problematic.
conversations, even though I think almost all of them are well-intentioned, a lot of these conversations where people are talking about reasons why women might need abortion sometimes end up sounding like poor women shouldn't be able to be mothers. And I don't think that's usually what people are intending, but it does sometimes come across that way.
It
And
comes across that way, and I think it does speak to a deeper issue. I think
yeah,
for any group of people to claim to be empowering, liberating, or for freedom for any one group, they can't also be hypocritical in saying that we only if they have all the money and the job and the family support and the community support, and they're seen as going to be contributing to society. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
opposite of what you're trying to attain, or the
Yeah.
end that we're trying to
Well, the
all
same
work
study we
towards.
were talking about in the article found that 60% of the women they surveyed said that they would have preferred to birth their baby if they had had more emotional and financial support. 60%. So there's clearly a huge need here. These are not people who are choosing abortion because they just don't want kids. In fact, as a separate, not part of the same study, but as a separate statistic that I thought was interesting, Gallup polled people on how many kids they had. It was people, I think it was also people like in their early to mid 40s, something like that. I basically asked them, how many kids do you have? And what do you think the ideal family size is? And then compared and contrasted it. I found the statistics in an article that was talking about people who regretted having kids, because they pointed out that I think it was 7% of people who had children said the ideal family size was no children. And they were like, see, some people regret having kids, which, yeah, there's a bell curve. Your mileage will vary. But what the article didn't mention is that 50% of the people who had no kids wished that they had kids, including, I think, 10% of them wish they had 4 or more. And so the reason we bring that up in this article is because we're trying to underscore that for a lot of people, abortion is not about, oh, I don't want kids. It's about something else. And they might even, and as they found, 60% would have preferred to have their baby. I think there's another point I want to bring up. I don't know how Good Counsel feels about this, but it's something I've been trying to raise with the pro-life movement more broadly. The pro-choice side will talk about how women who can't get abortions have worse economic outcomes and struggle more financially, and will leave out the part where the same research found that the women who couldn't get abortions and birthed and raised their children almost unanimously were glad they didn't abort. I find a lot of classism in focusing on, oh, they're worse off financially, and ignoring, oh, they're happy they have their babies. I find that very classist. But there is an analog on the pro-life side that concerns me sometimes. And to be blunt, I think that the pro-life movement has historically been too quick and casual about adoption. I think that a lot of, I'm not saying adoption is never the solution. I think sometimes it is. I think sometimes it's a sacrificial best option of a lot of difficult options, and we should recognize that it's complex, that it's emotionally difficult, and we should be supporting everybody involved. You know, it's come a long way compared to closed adoptions, decades past, all those things. I'm not saying it's never the solution, but I do think that a lot of pro-life people, well-meaning, are way too quick to offer adoption as a possibility, when most women in these difficult situations, they don't want to have a baby and then surrender that baby to someone else and wonder. They want support to take care of their baby. And you see this in the same research that they found 98% of women who physically showed up at abortion clinics and were turned away because they were too far along for the clinic's gestational limit, and then they had their babies and they raised their babies. 98% of them said they no longer wish they'd gotten an abortion. However, the women who placed for adoption, it was not nearly such a high statistic. Still, most of them were glad they didn't get an abortion, but it was something more like 3/4, or it was a much lower amount. Women who placed for adoption were significantly more likely to, down the road, still kind of say maybe they wish they'd gotten an abortion. And I think pro-lifers look at it and they think, how could you say that? You'd rather your kid be dead than be adopted? But that's not how a lot of people are conceptualizing it. They're seeing it as, I could have prevented this life from happening at all, rather than ending it. There's a really important distinction that some people have. But they're seeing it as, you know, this was very painful, and I don't know how the kid is doing necessarily. And I think, I'm just speculating here. This is just me, Monica, speculating. This is everything else I was quoting you research. This is just me speculating. I think women who get pregnant in difficult situations and seek abortion, a good proportion of them are very scared, and they know abortion, like we talked about, is like the responsible thing, or the thing they should do to take care of this hard situation. And then if they can't get it, the fear, the concerns, the problems they were having in their lives that led them to consider that in the first place, a lot of times those continue to exist. They don't just go away because you couldn't get an abortion, but you grow and birth and hold your baby. And for those of us who are parents, you understand the profoundness of that. It doesn't erase your problems, but it is, for most people, I'm not trying to say for everyone, but I think for most people, an unbelievable good. It doesn't erase your problems, but there
Right.
is a balancing act here. And sometimes adoption is the best situation. I'm not saying it never is, but for women who place for adoption, they don't get that. They don't get that other side of the coin. And I think it just changes the whole calculus. All
Mm.
this to say, again, I will say sometimes adoption is the best situation, but I think that the pro-life movement needs to be raising it as um, a distant backup option to figuring out what women need to feel they have the support and the resources to keep and parent their own babies. And
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
don't like, you know, the bumper stickers that show abortion and then cross out some letters and say adoption, you know what I'm
No.
talking about? And like, you know, like I said, we're very online, take it for what it's worth, but I see a lot of times online, these are, you know, people that are not in these situations where I do it too. We're all debating this. You know, if a woman describes her fears, her concerns, what's coming up down the pike that makes her feel like she can't handle this, and they'll say, well, you could do adoption. Dude, she would usually, I think, rather you say, yes, you can, and
Yeah.
we will help you. Now,
Because
you're
even if
right,
she
you can't.
has, even if she
Give it to
doesn't
a
have a
richer couple.
baby, yeah,
Yeah,
even if she
yeah,
doesn't have a baby, she still has those fears. She still has
yeah.
those insecurities. You're not taking away the the poverty, or I mean,
No.
if you are already pregnant, then you're saying you can't be who you are right now.
Well, and
And
you don't want to accidentally have us be the ones saying, you know what, you're right, you can't parent this baby. Give it to a better set of
right.
parents. Like
Yeah.
it's a delicate thing.
It is.
I've
Well,
talked to
and
some.
you asked, you didn't know where Good Counsel stands on that, and we 100% we encourage parenting. In fact,
Yes.
we don't do adoption. If you come to us and that's what you want, we can refer you. We have
Mm,
outside agencies that would obviously, if that's your choice.
sure,
And
sure,
but we
exactly.
also have counselors who can counsel you in that. But our first priority is to encourage parenting and natural families, so
Good.
that women, again, who are our first priority, women are empowered. Women have that foundation, so that you're not saying, okay, woman who came to me pregnant, you're going to have your baby, and now I make sure your baby's taken care of.
Right.
No, save the moms and they'll save the babies.
Right,
But we
right,
have to save the moms. We have to empower the women's. We have to walk along with them in and find out what it is they need truly and why they're insecure in the first place.
right.
Because even if abortion was a miracle, poof, gone, didn't happen, no
Sure.
repercussions, she's still an insecure woman who needs help in
She's
some
still
respects.
having those issues in her life, whatever they may be.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I think it was Heartbeat International. I spoke with Jessica Warner. She refers to it as a dirty band-aid. Abortion's a dirty band-aid
Mm.
because it's, which is gross, but it is.
No, but I get your point.
Yeah, it covers the wound and it festers.
Yeah,
It doesn't heal. And
yeah,
so we want to heal women because they are part of society and have an immense power to contribute to our community, to the lives around them, to just they have every single right to be fully supported as all of us are, and to
right.
feel like they have a community as all of us do.
So
And
when a woman
so,
is in a vulnerable situation and she's pregnant and she's not sure if she can handle this, I want the pro-life movement to be saying, you can handle this and we will help you. That's what we
yes,
want. And so I want to be careful that we don't accidentally say, yeah, you probably can't. Let's help you remove the child somewhere
here's
else.
this other couple who has it all
Right.
together and
Like I
they'll
said,
take care
again,
of
I will
all the
say
babies, which
sometimes that's what they want, and
again,
sometimes that is, you know, it's not never.
right.
I just think it
Well,
should
like the
be
Bells
a dose of
themselves,
caution.
Chris and Joan Bell are very pro adoption, but they're
Yes.
not pro adopting babies who have mothers who just need some help,
Right,
right?
right.
They're pro adopting the kids who really are abandoned and orphaned out there.
Sure.
But if a mom is there, then our first priority should be to keep families together. The trauma, we always say, like, so we're getting very much into not getting, we have always been, and we're doubling down on mental health in our homes. Women don't come to us because they have great lives. They come to us because they have trauma, and we need to address that. And most times it's profound. And so it's a rehabilitation of sorts to get that mom where she needs to be, so that she can break the cycles, and for her child, for her future children, for their children, that they don't relive this trauma and they don't pass down this trauma. And it's so important that to understand that pregnancy and birthing a child and then being separated from that child, either by abortion or that creates more trauma.
Yeah.
Adoption does create trauma. It is a lesser trauma. There is a healing to knowing that you did the best you could for someone. But if no one's helping you do better, then shame on everyone else in the community. We need more
exactly.
people helping the women. And really, that, I think, and I've spoken to several people now on the podcast where we're in agreement, and it's wonderful to hear. We're in agreement that the message has always been, but we haven't said it well enough, is help the women. We need to be caring for all women so that she truly does have options and knows her options. And that's one of the main things about this podcast. The one main reasons for us starting this podcast, Motherhood and, is you can do everything through motherhood. You can be a mother and, but also I want women to know that there are places like Good Counsel. So there's places for you to turn where you can get that support you need. So instead of the first thought in her mind being, all right, now I have to find a clinic, it can be, okay, well, I know there's places that support people like me. I know there's places, and to what you said about having your child be a really profound good, we find that it's incredibly redemptive. There are so many things, because we know the butterfly effect of smiling at a person can have profound impact, let alone a life being created, that often a woman can pull herself out of poverty, either for the sake of her child, its motivation, or there's even things then she now qualifies for having children. And there's parameters now that she steps into, that rises to that challenge, or community surrounds her once she has that child and lifts her up. So we're doing a disservice to women by saying, oh, I know you wanted that baby, but it really isn't, it's going to be a burden on our community. Well, good.
Yeah.
We all need to be involved.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed.
I know we're coming to the end of this podcast, and I feel like maybe we could have schedule another episode, because there's so much that we have in common and can just get the word out about. So I'd love to talk to you again. Sure. But I do want to mention the article one more time. It's Public Discourse, the Journal of the Witherspoon Institute. And the article is called Pivoting to Unwanted and Coerced Abortion, a Manifesto. And so I'll put the link underneath the podcast so that others can read this and share it, and just have that be the new conversation, have that be in the forefront, how we can just come together and help women, no matter where we come from and no matter where they come from.
Right, so, exactly.
Yeah. Is there anything else? Do you have an online, share all your online stuff now?
Oh,
Tell me all your handles and things.
Our website is secularprolife.org. And in particular, I like to tell people about our abortion debate index. So that's secularprolife.org/index. If you do like to debate online, which is not for everybody, but we have just dozens of common pro-choice talking points, and the content we have responding to it. And also, if you go on to our website, there's a section called Contact Us where you can sign up. We have an email newsletter. We send it every Friday that summarizes, we have so much content, it's ridiculous. So it summarizes our blog posts, our videos, our tweets, all the things for each week, and lets people know about any particular projects we have that are coming down the pike, or even sometimes we do events in person. Mostly it's online. So if people want to find us there, that would be great.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. And hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Thank you for having me.
If a woman is pregnant, she shouldn't have to worry about how she's going to carry, deliver, and care for her child. She can call Good Counsel. We need you to help spread the good news that Good Counsel's doors are open for all women, pregnant and parenting, and in need. Please join us and be an advocate for motherhood. Subscribe to our podcast, Motherhood and, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please be sure to visit Good Counsel's website for more information and to get involved at goodcounselhomes.org. We ask that you share our maternity help website, help.goodcounselhomes.org. Please share this website with others often so that it will reach more women in need. Subscribe to Good Counsel's YouTube channel for more inspiring and edifying content about maternity homes, the pro-life movement, and the life and ministry of Good Counsel's founder, Father Benedict Groeschel. And be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Good Counsel Homes. If you have any questions or ideas for future guests or topics, please message us on Facebook or Instagram. Remember, life is love. Talk to you soon.